Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening. I have just been doing 9 minutes of a live stream and hadn't pressed go. So thanks Darren for pointing out that I hadn't pressed go, and I'm going to have to redo the 9 minutes that I've just done. Not a problem. Okay, so sorry for the late start. It's 100% my fault, but we can get on tonight. Before we start, I want to have a quick chat about what we've got coming up. So we're coming out of lockdown now, so we've got some tentative training on the horizon. So first open water lake day is on the 3rd of April, followed by, we've got some courses running. So because we can't get in indoor pools, we're running a 2-day course on consecutive Wednesdays. So the 7th and the 14th of April is our first course of 2021. We've also got a couple of spaces on the Master trip in June, leaving on the 10th of June. And if you're fully trained or fully ready to get trained with rope access and fancy going into some of the cave lakes in Greece, we can squeeze you in on the second week of that, from the 3rd to the 11th of July. So if that's something you're interested in, message us. Then we've got Free Fest in July, all going ahead. I can't see Free Fest being kind of cancelled because it's outdoor camping, and you know, our social distancing, no matter what the laws are, pretty certain that we can fit them in with Free Fest. And we've got we've got a Greek yacht trip happening in September. In fact, we've got a Greek yacht trip happening in June, but I think it's sold out. Doesn't matter. Okay, so tonight you've seen by the title that I'm going to be talking about tables. So breathing tables, apnea tables, freediving tables. You see it banded around as this word, or this kind of title. And I've done quite a few live streams on specific tables and specific training, but I wanted tonight to cover in general the different tables and how they came around and what they do, what their good points and their bad points. I'm not going to cover walking tables or swimming tables or any tables. It's just the static tables, and I'm going to go through kind of what they are so that you can decide what ones fit in with your training. Okay, so we're going to start with the standard tables. And this is a list of tables that we're going to go through. So the standard tables were designed in the mid-90s by Aaron Solomon, and he designed because there was nothing available at all. So being a trailblazer that he was and still is, he designed a set of tables, and the original idea was that one of the tables trains the body to cope with high carbon dioxide, and that's the CO2 tables or table, and it has an associated O2 table which trains the body's tolerance to low O2, so, or oxygen. So let's just have a quick resume about the physiology of this. So when you hold your breath, you've got a lot of oxygen. You're just taking a nice fresh breath of air. You've got loads of oxygen, and you've got minimum amount of CO2. But when you hold your breath, your body's metabolizing, and especially if you're doing work, you're going to be burning up the O2, so the O2 will be going down, but you generate carbon dioxide, so that will be kind of coming up. Now, at some point, you'll have so much CO2 in the body, you'll get the urge to breathe, and it will really be quite a powerful urge to breathe, usually due to carbon dioxide. And if you continue, then the effects of low oxygen are kind of samba or blackout. So Aaron decided to make these tables that anybody can calculate and work out and tweak for themselves to train for, say, CO2 or O2. They're really good and they worked really well, but they didn't do what they said on the tin. They didn't really do what he originally wanted, but they worked as training tables, but they didn't do what he wanted. So they're still called O2 tables, still called CO2 tables, but they don't actually do that. So CO2 tables, very simple. You have a set of 8 breath holds and of the same length, and then you have a gap between them gets smaller. So the breath hold stays the same and the gap stays smaller. On average, it takes about 2 minutes to get rid of carbon dioxide after after a breath hold. So any gap less than 2 minutes means you've got CO2 in the body, or carbon dioxide in the body, left over from the last breath hold. So you're starting with kind of CO2 loading. So the idea is when you get down to 20 seconds or 30 seconds, you've got quite a lot of carbon dioxide built up. So your next breath hold, you've already got carbon dioxide. Now the trouble is with this table is that it's quite the CO2 levels are quite soft. If you really wanted to train CO2 tolerance, just go for a run, sit down, hold your breath. It will be super hard. The heart's pumping, you've working hard, the body's trying to offload the carbon dioxide, and the level will go through the roof. And that's why it's really, really hard to hold your breath. If you've gone for a run, for a sprint, especially a sprint, sit down and try and hold your breath. It's really hard because the carbon dioxide levels are super high. Your O2 levels are quite high as well because you're breathing fresh air as you sit down. Take those air in. So you've got lots of oxygen, so you're unlikely to black out. But your CO2 levels are through the roof. So it's very, very easy to design a CO2 table that actually trains high CO2. The reason you do 8 holds is because on average the 4th hold, 3rd or 4th hold is your best hold. Okay, and this just comes from the first hold your body doesn't know what to expect, the second hold you're getting into it, and bang, the 3rd hold you're zen, you're focused, you know the situation, you know what's going on about, and bam, the 3rd hold or the 4th hold is the best. Okay? This is a general rule. So Aaron said, well let's have it 8 holds. So if the 4th hold is your best hold, then number 5 is going to be pretty good as well. But then 6, 7, and 8 are going to be progressively harder as the blood gets tight. Now this is a terminology that I use quite a lot, that the blood gets tired. It's working. It's actually working hard to take in the oxygen and drop off the oxygen, and get rid of all the toxins that the body's producing. One of which is carbon dioxide. So physically, you get knackered from it. And this is what we call this: the blood gets tired from doing exercise or breath hold. So this is why you have 8 tables. Now the O2 tables are the opposite way around. So the breath holds get longer, but the gap stays the same, and they don't really train for low oxygen. It's quite dangerous to train with low oxygen, and effectively the only way to train for low oxygen, there's 2 ways to train with low oxygen, and the first is hyperventilation, because as I've said, with high carbon dioxide you get the urge to breathe. You really, really want to breathe. So so hyperventilation gets rid of the carbon dioxide, so you don't get that urge to breathe. So it allows the body to lower the oxygen level. Okay. Now this is super unsafe because you're working with low oxygen. You're finding the tolerance of the body of low oxygen, and I've already said that if you go too far, you black out. Then there's no, especially if you're in water, there's no self-rescue from it, and it's dangerous. Obviously, if you're doing it at home, you're going to fall over and bang your head. It's not good, and psychologically, it's disastrous if you black out. So we just can't kind of start recommending that type of low kind of training, low oxygen training, hypoxic training. The other way of doing it is altitude training. So as we go up, that air gets thinner, there's less oxygen, and the body has to cope with it. So altitude training, it works for freedivers. You can even get oxygen tents. So you put a tent over your bed, and you just turn down the oxygen level in the tent by a certain percentage. So all night you are breathing less than 21% oxygen, and the body goes, wow, you got less oxygen than I expected, and I've got to do something about it. So it generates red blood cells. So it generates red blood cells, which is kind of compensates for having low oxygen. So that's a kind of way you can train for low oxygen. Whether it's a dramatic difference, the jury's out. There have been some people who have trained specifically, done home tests, breath holds, series of testing breath holds, and slept in a tent for a couple of months and then tested again, and it does improve, but there are better things, more efficient ways of training. So they're the standard tables. So they've been around since the 90s, but the joy of them are that you can get them on your phone. Anybody with a smartphone can download. There's loads of programs or apps, that you can download, so you can run the tables, and they're simple. They're really flexible. You can move them, you can change them. The downside of them is they don't quite do what they say, and the other thing is very easy to get het up and caught up in the numbers, alright, because you're using a table that actually has numbers on it. You have to type in how long you're holding your breath, so it's very, very easy to get caught up in the numbers, especially with I think all the tables I've ever seen, they've got a count up clock, which is completely the wrong way around. It should be a countdown timer, so you don't know how long you've held your breath for. You just know how long you can hold how long you got more, and then you look and you go, well, I can do 5 seconds, but if it says 30 seconds, I'm not doing this, and it gives you a much better opportunity to soften the tables. Okay, so that's my gripe. They do really make you push, and it also the problem. That's the problem. The other thing is there's so many variations. So I did 2 minutes CO2 table. How long was your recovery? 10 minutes between each one. Or I did 2 minutes in between, or whatever. There's so many variations that you can kind of big yourself up and play into. I can't remember the word. Ego. So there is that. So following on from the standard tables, a guy called Richard Wonka designed the Wonka tables, which are a lot softer. We like the Wonka tables, and they basically, you hold until you get a contraction, and then you hold a certain time after the contractions, which is very soft. And the idea was that as the holds get harder, the breath hold gets shorter. So maybe it's maybe your first hold, say a minute until you get the contractions, and then you hold 15 seconds more. So just for an example. Then as they get harder, you just hold until the contractions, it might be 30 seconds, and then you hold 15 seconds longer. So you're kind of pushing into the uncomfort of of the hold due to high CO2, high carbon dioxide, pushing into it a certain designated amount. Now I like them because realistically you don't need to know how long your breath hold is until the contractions. So it's really good, but he's kind of missed it a little bit if you read the actual the tables that he's put out, because it doesn't matter. You just hold your breath until you get contractions, then start a countdown time of 15 seconds. Works. But of course people don't like that. People want to know numbers, so I hold my breath for 2 minutes when my first contraction starts. Well, it's irrelevant. It's 2 minutes. It could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It doesn't matter. First contraction comes. Boom. The other thing is contractions don't come always because of CO2, which kind of defeats the object of it. Does play a little bit into the mental. In fact, I should update this thing, because the Wonka tables does play into the mental a little bit, but possibly not in a good way, because you're trying to train your subconscious, and your subconscious knows that as soon as you have a contraction, you've only got 15 seconds left. Yeah. So as soon as you get a contraction, and bear in mind that quite a lot of contractions are classed as fake contractions. It's not CO2. It's the subconscious deciding that you've held your breath long enough and you should breathe again. So you're playing with psychology there. It's a little bit kind of hit and miss. Okay, a little bit hit and miss. It's fine. So moving on. The crazy tables. So these are the first tables that actually came when I was working with Herbert in 2006, and these are the first tables that we put into the No Tanks training system. Now these are true CO2 tables. So I still say to everybody, members of the club, etc., I'll say to anybody, if you want to train CO2, just go for a run and hold your breath. And then do it again, hold your breath. Or, as we do in No Tanks, you'll skip. So you skip for 2.5 minutes or 3 minutes, and the last 30 seconds you try and hold your breath. That's a CO2 table, and you can repeat as much as you like. It's painful, high CO2. But the crazy tables are also CO2 table, but they're true CO2 tables. So you start by doing an empty lung breath hold. Say for sake of argument, 30 seconds. I mean, that's quite a long, for most people, that's quite a long empty lung breath hold, but we'll just take it as and then, so your CO2 levels are quite high, because you've got your lungs are empty, so any CO2 the body's kind of producing goes straight into the lungs, and the lungs kind of fill up with CO2. The level of CO2 goes up because there's not much volume in there. So after 30 seconds, you're feeling the CO2, and then you sip just the tiniest bit of air. So you're increasing the amount of oxygen you've got in your body, but your CO2 levels, they're dropping a little bit, but not much. They're still high. And then every 15 seconds after that, you sip again. So CO2 levels drop a little bit, but effectively you should, in theory, do a breath hold that's a similar sort of length to your normal breath hold, but instead of just the last bit of the breath hold being hard because of the CO2, the whole lot's hard because you've had high CO2 and you've kept it high for the whole time. Okay? Again, it's not perfect because it's got numbers involved. It doesn't have to have numbers involved, and when we run it in the club, I don't give the numbers. Obviously 30 seconds because that's the first time that I say sip, and in theory you could count, but believe me, when you're doing the crazy tables, you're not gonna. You start counting. That's one sip. That's 30 seconds. Oh, that's another sip. That's 45 seconds. That's another sip. By the time you get to there, you're just like, you're not thinking about counting anymore. It's gone. You're just sipping. Okay, so you can get around not having numbers because it doesn't matter. You either end up fully full and you can't sip any more air in, or just you can't hold your breath anymore. Okay, but there you go. Anyway, so moving on from that, we've got the Zany tables. Now, Zany tables are slightly different, and they work on the dive reflexes, and they are extremely powerful. If you do them properly and you do them regularly, you can teach your body that you want the dive reflexes to happen. Okay. Now, the mammalian dive reflex is just one. Well, okay. Depends which book you read as to whether they say the mammalian dive reflex is a set of reflexes, or the mammalian dive reflex is one of a set of dive reflexes. But it doesn't matter which way around you look at it. One and the easiest reflex for your body to use is bradycardia. That's lowering of the heart rate. Your body does it. If you're quite chilled, relaxed, or in a comfortable situation, and you hold your breath, and you've been holding your breath, for a while, you started training for a while, very quickly your heart rate will drop. Okay. So the Zany tables, all we do is we keep the heart rate high. So usually on a treadmill, not a treadmill, a stationary bike. Don't do it on a real bike on the roads, guys. Come on, that's just silliness. But on a bike, stationary bike, and you keep the heart rate high, not super high, but high enough that you know it's high. Now, if you're in a gym and you've probably got heart rate monitor on the handlebars, you can just stare at that heart rate and keep it, 105 or something. So it's not super high, but it's high enough. And then when you do a series of breath holds, we usually do them empty lung to increase the effect of it. Your body will try and lower the heart rate, and then it can't. So it tries all the other things. So vasoconstriction, blood shunt, possibly blood shunt, that narrows the focus down, gets the brain working more efficiently, which is why it's called the Zany tables, because at the end of it you are like zoned out, or rather zoned in, not zoned out. We don't want them zoning out, we want zoning in. So really focused. You feel a little bit kind of weird, I suppose. So that's the Zany tables. They're all available on PDFs. Come to Facebook, message me, and I'll send you the PDFs of them. They're all available. There's nothing clever there, or nothing secret, should I say. Okay, and then we move on to the lazy tables. Now, if you've been training for a little while, lazy tables where it's at. They are the single most potent, effective. That's the word I want. The lazy tables are the single most effective breath hold table that's out there. Knowing you can hold your breath in perfect situation, whether it's dry or in a pool, doesn't matter, but having a number in your head, in a perfect situation with your favourite buddy with you, your best wetsuit, in a beautiful warm water, the kids are not in the pool, so silent, knowing you can hold your breath for a certain time then has little or no use whatsoever. It has no use. Because as soon as you get into a situation where you haven't got all these perfect things, it's going to play on your mind. I can hold, and this is again where you see people posturing. Hang on a sec. You have people posturing. I can hold my breath for this long, for that long. Oh, great! Sitting on the sofa, you can hold your breath for 5 minutes. That's brilliant. As soon as you get them in open water, as soon as there's a wave involved, or it's a little bit cold, or then it's not going to be 5 minutes. But worse than that, they know in the back of their mind that it's not going to be a 5 minute breath hold, and they've got nothing to judge it on. So we work at No Tanks with personal worsts. What can you hold your breath? It's the only real way you can use numbers positively is to have, like on a cold day with waves, I can hold my breath for X amount. And it's never 3 minutes and 26 seconds. It's just roughly 3 minutes. Yeah, on a really bad day, I can do that. And this gives you a positive boost. because if it is cold and waves and you got your old plastic fins on that you've not worn for the last 3 years, we shouldn't be diving. Like, but if you know you can hold your breath in that situation, then it's going to be a better situation than that. So you got that personal worst in the bag, and it's not actually that wavy, and it's not actually that cold, and actually, I quite like these plastic fins. I've not worn for 3 years. So already, you've got your baseline, and you can work up for it. And this is where the lazy tables are trying to teach your body, your brain, your subconscious, how long you can hold your breath for. That's why they're called the lazy tables. Generally, it's one hold. You can notch up to 4 holds, but effectively it's one hold. So it's super quick, super easy. 1 minute, breathe up, and then a hold. That's it. And you only do it until it's hard. That's it. Now, I said earlier that the 4th hold's the best hold. Yeah, but when you're training, you don't care which is the best hold. Just do one. And it's not the best one. Yeah, but you're not looking at the numbers. So it's a hard breath hold. Hard as in, if you're going to look at time, it's going to be harder to get to the same time as on the first hold as it would on the 3rd hold. But we're training. So why does it matter? You want to train hard, make the dive easy. So lazy tables is 1 breath hold. Okay, so it's super short. I'm not going to say how short because it depends on how long you hold your breath. But it's your personal worst breath hold plus a minute for breathe up. That's it. So you can do it 2 or 3 times a day. Your blood doesn't get tired particularly. Again, there's a little bit more to it. I can send it a PDF if you want. And then we go on to the final one that I'm going to talk about today, the cycle of 4. Now, the cycle of 4 is a month-long training breath hold program that does genuinely play with CO2, O2, distraction techniques, and non-distraction techniques, and it rolls it all into one, and it takes at least a month of training 4 times a week or 3 times a week. Okay, even the days you're not training, you're kind of training by kind of fitting into the program. So if you want a cycle of 4, I can send it to you. It's absolutely not a problem. We can send it to you, but there's no point in trying to do the cycle of 4 until you've done at least the lazy tables and some standard tables. Okay, and more importantly, same with all training, you've got notes about it. You've kept a diary. Because my first question when you start a cycle of 4 is, are you a distraction diver, non-distraction diver? If you don't know, well, then there's no point in starting. Okay, so do you like having the TV on with the sound off when you hold your breath? Do you like the TV on with the sound on, sound off, radio on, radio off? Do you like people walking around the room? Do you like it completely silent? These things, you need to know what you like. Okay, not so you can make it perfect so you can hold your breath longer, but you can not do it to make, or rather when you don't do it, you know that a breath hold is going to be harder, and you can be aware of you choosing to make the breath hold harder or softer, harder or easier. Okay, so these all fit into the cycle of 4. So generally I would suggest people do, if you've never done anything before, you want to start with the standard tables, just because you hold your breath a lot. Okay, so eight holds. So that's you're going to do nearly 100 breath holds in a couple of weeks. That's quite a lot of breath holds. That's what you want. You want a lot of telling your body this is what I'm going to do, with a lot of repetition. Then move on to something like the crazy tables, just to mix it up a bit. Zany tables can come in anytime because they're not working on CO2. They're working on the dive reflexes. Then you need to do the lazy tables for at least 2 weeks, I would suggest, before you get onto the cycle of 4. So you've got a good month. Standard tables, crazy tables if you want, lazy tables, and then you can do the cycle of 4. And the cycle of 4 is 1 month, or if you want to do a double, 2 months, and then you stop. You don't do it again. You don't carry on doing the cycle of 4. Okay, you write down your personal worst, you write down all the information about what your breath hold is, then you take a week off and you don't do anything, and then you start the program again. Anyway, that's the tables in a nutshell. As I say, I'm not going through the in water tables or walking tables, and it's only a general a very light thing, like the Wonka tables. There's the do mass extension, so just variations of it, and the noble tables, which kind of led to the Wonka table, but they're all variations on a theme. So these are the basic say 5 tables that you need to know about, and pick which ones you're going to be doing. So thank you very much for joining me, and hope to see you next week. So let's have a look. So we are on the 22nd. So next week we have part 2 of your dry training program. Okay, so we did the first part 1 on March the 1st, and this one next Monday we have the second part. So bring your diaries, bring your diagnostics, and we'll see you next Monday at 7 o'clock. This time I will press go at 7 o'clock. Thank you very much for joining me.